Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. I used to think reflections were harmless, simple shapes made of light and angles, glass and repetition. They copy you, mimic you, exist only because you exist. I believed mirrors were obedient things, incapable of acting on their own. But that was before he started showing up in mine. Before the night I realized that whatever lived behind the mirror wasn't just watching me, it was learning me. The days after episode 2 went viral were a blur of excitement. Interview requests, sponsorship deals, thousands of new subscribers flooding in overnight. My comment section exploded with people claiming they felt something behind them while watching. Others swore they saw a tall figure in my reflection mid-recording. I brushed it all off as pareidolia, the human brain inventing faces from shadows. But deep down, something had already begun shifting in my apartment and in me. It was a Thursday evening when the first real sign appeared. I had just finished a live stream Q&A. My throat burned from talking. My eyes stung from studio light. I shut everything down and leaned back, letting the hum of my PC fade into the room's quiet. That's when the tap, tap, tap broke the silence. 3 slow, deliberate taps. They didn't come from the door, not from the window, not from the floorboards. They came from the mirror hanging behind my desk. I didn't move at first. My skin tightened across my spine, instinct screaming in a language older than thought. I turned slowly in my chair, breath held, waiting to see what had made the sound. Nothing moved, nothing shifted, nothing stood in the room, but in the glass. The reflection was wrong. My chair was there, my desk, the lights, but there was an extra shadow, tall and narrow, stretched vertically as if someone had pulled a silhouette upward like clay. No features, no details, just a presence. I blinked, the shadow blinked out. I told myself it was exhaustion. The second sign came 2 nights later. I woke at 3:11 a.m. to the sound of whispering, not voices I could understand, just the texture of breath against glass, soft and cold. I sat up, heart hammering. My room was dark except for the sliver of city light leaking through blinds. I listened. The whispering stopped, but the air felt wrong, thick like fog inside my lungs. I turned my head toward the mirror across the room and froze. A handprint was pressed against the inside of the glass, not on the surface, not smudged by a human hand. Inside the mirror, the fingers were impossibly long, bending at joints that didn't make sense. The palm was narrow, the pressure visible, as if something had leaned forward, studying me while I slept. I stood, my legs shook. I stepped closer. I tried to convince myself it was condensation, a trick of light, anything except what it appeared to be. My reflection stared back, a pale shape in the dark, but there was something else behind me, a faint line of height, a contour too tall to belong to me. I backed away. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the mark was gone. I tried calling Grace again, the mysterious sender of the original email, who vanished after warning me not to continue the story. Her number was disconnected. Her email bounced back. It was as if she had been erased, or as if she had been removed. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about her last message. If he can leave marks, he is almost through. The third sign arrived while I was recording the introduction for episode 3. My script was ready, my setup perfect, my voice steady. But the moment I hit record, the room changed. Not visually subtly, the air thickened, the temperature dipped, and the familiar buzz of electronics faded, like someone had placed the entire room underwater. I swallowed hard and spoke into the microphone. Tonight's story comes from a place most people fear without knowing why, the spaces where reflections stop obeying us. I paused. A soft creak echoed behind me. My shoulders tensed. I didn't turn around. Instinct screamed not to. I stared into my monitor instead. At first, the reflection looked normal. My face, my desk, the room. But then the dark space behind me began to stretch, like the pixels were warping. A shape formed slowly. A head, shoulders too wide, arms too long, hanging low like wet rope. My breath caught. The figure behind me wasn't standing. It was leaning toward me. I shut my eyes, counted to 3, opened them slowly. He was still there, clearer than before. No face, just smooth skin where features should be. No eyes. But somehow I felt him looking at me, my body locked in place. Finally, the lights flickered, the monitor flashed white, and he vanished. The room returned to normal, but my heartbeat didn't. I slammed the recording off and pushed away from the desk. My chest tightened, my breaths short and sharp. There was no denying it anymore. He wasn't folklore. He wasn't a story. He was here. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and opened a new message to Grace, even knowing she wouldn't respond. He's showing up in every reflection. What do I do? Before I could hit send, my phone vibrated. A new email notification appeared from an unknown address. Subject line, "Don't turn around." I froze. My phone slipped from my fingers because behind me, in the silent room, I heard breathing, slow, deep, patient. And when I forced myself to look at the dark surface of my powered-off monitor, a tall, faceless figure stood inches behind my shoulder, waiting. Ethan didn't sleep after the incident. Even when the sky turned pale with morning light, his mind stayed trapped in the darkness of the night before trapped in the memory of the tall, faceless figure standing behind him in the reflection. The apartment felt infected, tainted with something that didn't belong in the world he knew. Every surface that could hold a reflection suddenly seemed dangerous. Every shadow felt like a place where something might be watching. By 8 a.m., he found himself sitting on the floor beside his couch, exhausted but too afraid to let his eyes close. The curtains were drawn, the TV unplugged, the mirrors in his hallway were covered with towels. He even placed a blanket over the microwave door because it reflected too much of the room. Yet even with every precaution, the air still felt wrong, heavy, as if someone else was inside with him. Just out of sight, he checked his phone again. No new messages, no replies from Grace. He didn't know whether she was alive or dead or something worse. Finally, he stood up, grabbed his laptop, and settled at his dining table. He needed to think clearly. He needed a plan. But as he opened the lid and the screen lit up, his heart jumped. His own reflection appeared faintly against the black loading background, just his own face, tired and frightened, staring back. But he flinched anyway. When the desktop appeared, he went straight to his email. Nothing. He refreshed. Nothing again. It's just a story, he whispered to himself. Just a story that got too far into your head. But as the words left his mouth, the apartment creaked deep, slow, like a shifting weight above him, or inside the walls. Ethan froze. His breath caught in his throat. His eyes drifted toward the ceiling, but he saw nothing, only stillness. He tried to shake off the tension by focusing on something practical, researching mirrors and folklore. Maybe if he understood the legend better, he could figure out what was happening. He opened a search tab. Reflections, demons, folklore, mirror entities. Dozens of articles appeared. Most were junk urban legends, fictional creepypastas, paranormal blogs. But one link caught his eye, a forum archive from 2011, titled "The One Behind the Glass." He clicked. The page was a wall of text, poorly formatted and mostly anonymous. But one post stood out. If you see him 3 times, he becomes real enough to move. Not real in our world yet, but close. Close enough to breathe. Close enough to learn you. When he learns your shape, he steps through. Ethan swallowed hard. Another reply read, "Mirrors weaken first, then screens, then shadows. Once he is fully formed in your reflection, you must not turn around. He moves when acknowledged." Ethan exhaled shakily. His mind flashed back to the night before, to the feeling of heat on his neck, to the faint sound of footsteps, to the impossible reflection of a figure that didn't exist in real space. He shut his laptop quickly and pushed away from the table. He needed to get out of the apartment, at least for a little while. Being surrounded by reflective surfaces made him feel sick. He grabbed his hoodie, slipped it on, and headed for the door. But when he opened it, he froze. A small, rectangular object lay on the floor in front of him, as if someone had slid it under the door. It was a photograph. His blood turned to ice. His hands shook as he picked it up. It was a picture of him, taken inside his apartment, taken from behind. He was sitting at his desk, recording episode 3, his face lit by the monitor glow, and behind him, in terrifying clarity, stood the faceless figure, long, tall, leaning forward, its head almost touching his. Ethan stumbled backward, dropping the photograph. It fluttered to the floor like an accusation. His heart pounded so hard it felt like a physical blow in his chest. Someone had been inside his apartment, or something. He slammed the door shut and locked it 3 times. Breathing hard, the walls felt close, the air tight. He grabbed his phone and called the police. The call rang once, twice, then cut off. No beep, no voicemail, just dead silence. He tried again, same result. He checked his signal, full bars, no reason for the failure. Something was interfering, something that didn't want him contacting the outside world. His skin crawled. Suddenly, the lights in the apartment flickered, once, twice, then held steady. Ethan backed into the corner, trying to see everything in the room at once. His eyes darted from window to floor to wall to shadow. Then he noticed something he had overlooked. The blanket he had draped over the microwave door was on the floor. He stared at it, his throat tightened. Slowly, he turned toward the microwave's reflective surface. With a trembling breath, he leaned forward just enough to glimpse the reflection. He saw the kitchen, the wall, the doorway, and a long, pale finger curling around the edge of the doorway behind him. Just the finger, just enough to be seen. He gasped and whipped around. Nothing. The doorway was empty, silent, still. But in the reflection, the finger moved. It slid slowly across the doorway frame, bending and twitching like an insect limb. Its skin was smooth and colorless. Its nail was long, sharp, and curved, not human. Ethan stumbled away from the microwave, his legs weak. His breath came in harsh, quick bursts. The stories online had warned about this. When he began appearing in multiple surfaces at once, it meant proximity, it meant intention, it meant the crossing had begun. He ran to his living room, grabbing his keys and shoes. He didn't care where he went. Anywhere without mirrors would be better than staying here. He reached for the front door and stopped. His door had a peephole, a reflective peephole. Inside that tiny circle of glass, distorted but still visible, was a tall, smooth face staring back, not blinking, not moving, just waiting. Ethan's breath shattered. He fell backward onto the floor, scrambling away from the door. His heartbeat roared in his ears like a storm. He shut his eyes tightly. When he opened them, the peephole was empty again, but the message was clear. He had learned Ethan's shape, and soon he would step through. Ethan didn't remember falling asleep. One moment he was sitting on the floor, back pressed against the cold wall, staring at the door as if it might breathe. The next moment, he woke to a silence so complete it felt unnatural. Like the apartment itself was holding its breath. The curtains were still drawn, the lamps still off, but morning light leaked through the cracks, giving the room a dim gray tone, soft but hollow. Ethan pushed himself upright, every muscle stiff. His throat burned with dryness, and his thoughts felt stuck halfway between dream and memory. For a moment, he wondered whether everything from the night before had been real. The handprint, the finger curling around the doorway frame, the reflection in the peephole, the photograph. His heart froze. The photograph. He scanned the floor. It wasn't there. He stood slowly. His legs wobbled. He crouched, lifting blankets, checking under the couch, under the table. Nothing. The photograph had vanished. Either someone had taken it, or it had never been something human to begin with. His phone buzzed. Ethan jolted violently, dropping it. The screen lit up where it bounced across the wooden floor. A moment later, it buzzed again and again and again. Notifications flooded the lock screen emails, message requests, alerts from his channel, his latest upload. Episode 2 was exploding again. Over 100,000 new comments. He picked up the phone. His hands shook as he swiped the screen open. The comments weren't normal. They all said one thing. I saw him behind you. He's closer in this episode. Why is something moving in your reflection? There was a hand on your shoulder at 12:14. Ethan, don't record again. Thousands of variations of the same message. Ethan's blood turned cold. He opened the video, scrubbed to 12:14. The air left his lungs. His reflection in the monitor clearly showed a tall, smooth-faced figure behind him, closer than he remembered. Much closer. Its hand hovered an inch above his shoulder. Fingers bent like claws, ready to close. Ethan slammed the laptop shut. He stumbled toward the bathroom sink, splashing cold water on his face. Anything to claw back a sense of reality. But then he froze, because the mirror in front of him was no longer reflecting him. It reflected his bathroom, the tiles, the light, the faucet, but not him. His figure was missing entirely. Instead, another shadow stood in his place, a tall silhouette, bent slightly forward as though studying him. Ethan staggered backward, hitting the wall. His breath came out in sharp gasps. He shut his eyes. He counted to 10. When he opened them again, the reflection was normal. His own face stared back, pale and terrified. But now there was something new. Small hairline cracks spreading across the edge of the mirror, like pressure from the inside. He needed to leave. He grabbed his keys, barely managing to steady his hands, and walked toward the door. He reached for the handle, then stopped. The peephole. The last time he'd looked at it, something had stared back. He tore a strip of duct tape from a drawer and slapped it over the peephole. Then he unlocked the door and swung it open. The hallway outside was empty, but on the wall directly across from his apartment was a long streak of black, like soot smeared by a giant hand dragging its fingers downward. He took a step out. A soft whisper drifted behind him. He spun around. The whisper came again. The sound of breath over cold glass, slow, deliberate. He turned back toward his apartment doorway. The mirror in the hallway, one he had never noticed before, now reflected him. Except it didn't. It reflected a version of him standing perfectly still, staring back, no blinking, no breathing. A frozen copy watching him with dead, unmoving eyes. And behind the mirror version of him, stood the tall, faceless figure, closer than ever, almost touching. Ethan stumbled backward, hitting the opposite wall. The reflection remained frozen, as if mocking his terror. "No," Ethan whispered. "No, no." The lights in the hallway flickered violently. The mirror version of him didn't react, but the faceless figure did. It tilted its head slowly, almost curiously. Then a crack spread down the length of the mirror. Then another, like something pushing from behind the glass. Ethan's breath shattered. He ran down the hall, around the corner, toward the stairwell. He didn't look back. He didn't dare. His footsteps echoed wildly as he descended flight after flight, lungs burning, vision blurring. He reached the lobby, slammed through the exit door, and spilled into the daylight. Cars honked. People walked past. The world looked normal, painfully normal. He doubled over, clutching his knees, dragging in deep breaths. Relief trembled through him until a movement caught his eye. A parked car beside him, shiny, clean, its side mirror angled slightly upward, catching his reflection. Except his reflection wasn't alone. A tall figure stood behind him again, closer than ever before, closer than reality allowed. Ethan backed away, shaking, staring at the mirror. The figure's hand lifted, pressed against the glass from the inside, and the mirror began to crack. Ethan didn't know how long he stood frozen on the street, his breath fogging the air as he stared at the cracking reflection in the car's side mirror. The tall, faceless figure behind him remained perfectly motionless inside the glass. glass, as though trapped in a silent scream. Its elongated hand pressed against the reflective surface from the inside. Cracks radiated outward like a spider web of fractured reality. Ethan stumbled backward, his body trembling uncontrollably. Cars passed. People walked by. No one saw what he saw. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the image burned into his vision. When he opened them again, the mirror was normal. No cracks, no figure, just the distorted outline of the city. His knees weakened, and he staggered toward the sidewalk, gripping a lamppost to steady himself. The cold metal grounded him, but fear still surged violently through his veins. He couldn't go back home. The apartment was no longer safe. He had nowhere else to run, no one to turn to. Grace had vanished. The story was becoming real, and he, whatever he was growing stronger with every reflection. With shaking hands, Ethan pulled out his phone. No new messages, no service, just a flickering searching icon where his signal should be. He swallowed hard and started walking, forcing himself to move despite the heaviness in his chest. The streets felt different, darker. People blurred at the edges of his vision. Windows looked like open mouths. The world felt less like reality and more like a thin veil stretched over something monstrous. He kept his gaze low, avoiding anything that could reflect him. Car windows, shop doors, puddles on the curb. But reflections made themselves known anyway. Every so often, he caught a glimpse not from the corners of mirrors, but from the corners of his mind, of a tall shape following him, never close enough to touch, never far enough to forget. He turned a corner and entered a narrow alleyway behind a row of buildings. The alley was dim, littered with trash bags and old crates. He needed somewhere quiet, somewhere hidden, to think, to breathe. But the moment he stepped inside, he felt it, a presence, watching, waiting. He spun around, heart pounding. At first, he saw nothing. Then, slowly, he noticed a small shard of broken glass on the ground. It shimmered weakly in the alley's faint light. Ethan stepped closer, dread tightening his ribs. The shard reflected not him, but a tall figure standing directly behind him. He gasped and whipped around. No one, but the shard told the truth. He picked it up with trembling fingers, his heartbeat roaring in his ears. The reflection inside the shard shifted, flickered, and the faceless figure leaned forward within the tiny glass fragment, distortions rippling across its impossible body. Ethan dropped the shard, stumbling backward. It shattered into dust. He turned and ran. His footsteps echoed like frantic whispers as he sprinted out of the alley and into the open street. He didn't stop until he reached a crowded cafe with large windows. He hesitated before stepping inside. Windows meant reflections. Reflections meant him. But he needed people around, needed noise, needed anything other than silence. He pushed the door open and slipped inside. The warm air and chatter washed over him like a weak blessing. A barista greeted him with a polite smile he couldn't return. He ordered coffee only to have something to hold, something warm. He sat in a far corner, facing away from the glass. He kept his eyes trained on the table, refusing to look at anything shiny spoons, cups, his phone screen, but ignoring reflections only made him more aware of their presence. He pulled out his laptop, powered it on, and turned the screen brightness all the way down until it was nearly black. Then he opened a blank document and typed, "Grace, are you alive?" Seconds passed. Nothing. He typed again. "He's following me. What do I do?" The cursor blinked. Then letters began appearing on the screen, but not by his hands. You saw him again. Ethan's throat tightened. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. Trembling, more letters typed themselves. "Stop looking into things that reflect." He slammed the laptop shut, breath shaking. People around him turned, startled by the sound, but he ignored them. His chest felt tight, as if invisible hands were wrapping around it. He couldn't stay here. The cafe was too open, too bright, too filled with windows. He grabbed his things and bolted outside. The sun was beginning to set, dipping low behind buildings. The city lights flickered on one by one, illuminating the streets with a dim, golden glow. But with every new light came new reflections, storefronts, car hoods, glass panels, and within each reflection, he appeared, sometimes far away, standing motionless, sometimes closer, like a shadow stretching toward him. Once, Ethan swore he saw the figure's head tilt, as if learning the motion from him. Panic clawed at his ribs. He turned and rushed down another side street, desperate to find somewhere without mirrors, without glass anywhere. He couldn't follow. He ducked into an old hardware store just as the owner was closing up. The man gave him an odd look, but didn't question him. Ethan wandered through aisles filled with tools, ropes, brushes, wood, anything that wasn't reflective. He found a back corner and sat on a crate, catching his breath. For a moment, the silence felt normal again. Then his phone vibrated. A notification. No service yet. A message delivered from an unknown sender. He opened it. There was no text, just a photo taken from behind him, inside the hardware store, standing inches behind his shoulder. Was a faceless figure with one hand raised, touching his reflection in the store's dirty metal panel. Ethan screamed and dropped the phone. His blood froze. The store's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, humming like an electric heartbeat, and as they flickered, the metal surface beside him began to darken, not from shadow, but from something pressing from the other side. Long fingers, pushing, denting the metal outward. He scrambled away, knocking over boxes, nearly slipping as he ran for the exit. The owner shouted something, but Ethan didn't hear. He burst out into the street, chest burning, lungs fighting for air. Night had fallen fully now. Every window reflected his terror. Every car mirror echoed his dread. And in each one, he stood behind Ethan, closer, clearer, more real, and the glass was beginning to crack everywhere. Ethan looked. Ethan had never understood what it meant for reality to feel thin until that night. The night the world seemed made of fragile glass, stretched tight around something hungry. By the time he stumbled away from the hardware store, breath ragged, the streets no longer felt like streets. Every light flicker, every passing shadow, every reflective surface felt alive, pulsing with an intelligence that studied him with growing certainty. He could feel him there behind the mirrors, behind the glass, behind the shimmer of anything that echoed light. He ran until his lungs burned, until his knees gave out, collapsing near an abandoned bus stop where shattered panels of glass still clung to metal frames. He kept his eyes down. If he didn't see the reflections, maybe they wouldn't see him, but he could feel the cold radiating off the shards, as if the broken pieces were breathing. He pressed the heel of his hand against his forehead. "This isn't happening," he whispered, though he knew it was. The universe had rules once. Reflection meant physics, angles, surfaces. Now it felt like reflections were doors. And he had been foolish enough to look into them too many times. A rustling sound snapped his attention upward. A figure approached from the end of the street. For a moment, hope flared. Another person, someone real, someone who might help. But as the figure drew closer, Ethan's body stiffened. The man walked too slowly, too deliberately. His steps didn't match the sound they made. His arms hung too low, like they were longer than they should be. His head tilted with a strange, jerking movement each time he shifted direction. Ethan backed away. His breath stuttered. No, you're not real." His voice came out thin and cracking. The figure continued forward until it reached the edge of a broken panel of bus stop glass. That's when Ethan saw the truth. The figure had no reflection. None. The street behind it reflected perfectly. Even the dust motes in the air shimmered faintly in the fractured shards. But the figure cast no mirrored image at all. Ethan scrambled to his feet. The figure lifted its head. Its face was blank, not smooth like a mannequin, smooth like something still forming, still deciding which shape to take. And Ethan realized, with horror curling in his gut, that the figure was taller now, much taller than the one in the reflections before. He was growing, evolving, becoming more real by the minute. Ethan ran again. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew where he couldn't go. Anywhere with mirrors, anywhere with glass, anywhere with darkness deep enough to reflect even the faintest outline. He ducked into a narrow passage behind a row of apartments, the air heavy with the scent of damp brick. The alleyway ended in a small courtyard with no windows, just old brick walls and a rusted fire escape. No reflections. He slumped against the wall, drawing in shaky breaths. For the first time in hours, the air felt still. Then his phone buzzed. Ethan flinched. The screen lit his face with a weak glow. A new message from an unknown number. "Stop running. He follows your shape." He nearly dropped the phone. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he typed back, "Who is this? What does he want from me?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Finally, the reply came. "He wants to fill the space you left in the mirror." Ethan's stomach lurched. That moment in the bathroom mirror, the moment his reflection disappeared, wasn't a hallucination. It was a replacement, a vacancy, an invitation. He had left a space. And the man behind the mirror was stepping into it piece by piece. Footsteps echoed at the far end of the alley. Slow, heavy, sure. Ethan pressed himself against the wall. His eyes darted around frantically. No reflections good, but shadows were still dangerous. He remembered one line from the old forum post. When the reflections weaken, he moves through shadows next. next, the footsteps grew louder. A deep chill settled over the courtyard. The air thickened, vibrating subtly, as if reality were adjusting to fit something massive inside it. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. Then he saw it. A shadow detached itself from the far wall. It stretched too tall, too thin, elongating like melted tar. The shape flickered, struggling to hold form, as if it were still learning how to exist outside the mirror. "Please," Ethan whispered, though he didn't know who he was begging, him or the universe. The shadow straightened, its head tilted in that now familiar, nauseating motion. And then it stepped forward, not walking, sliding, its limbs dragged behind, as if gravity had not yet accepted them. Ethan bolted for the fire escape ladder, his fingers scratched against rusty metal as he pulled himself upward, climbing 3 rungs before the structure groaned ominously. He didn't care. He kept climbing. Below him, the shadow stopped. Then it rose, vertical, smooth, effortless, a dark tower reaching toward him. He climbed faster, breath ripping from his chest, hands burning as metal scraped skin. He threw himself onto the first landing and raced toward a window, praying it wasn't reflective. He didn't get the chance to see, because the moment he stepped onto the landing, a reflection appeared in a puddle of water collected on the metal platform. Ethan froze. His reflection didn't move the way he did. It didn't gasp, didn't panic, didn't look at the shadow below. Instead, the reflection smiled. A slow, stretching smile forming where no mouth should exist. The shadow climbed closer. Ethan stumbled backward, slipping against the railing. He shut his eyes and screamed. When he opened them again, the reflection was gone. So was the shadow. So was the courtyard. He was alone on the landing, breathing hard, shaking violently. The puddle reflected only the night sky. He staggered to his feet. He knew now, more clearly than ever. He wasn't escaping. He was being led, guided, driven somewhere the man behind the mirror wanted him to be. His phone buzzed again. One message. "He's almost finished learning you." Ethan's vision blurred with terror. He typed desperately, "What happens when he finishes?" The reply came instantly. "He won't need the mirrors anymore." Ethan didn't know when the shaking in his hands began, only that it wouldn't stop. The message on his phone echoed through him like a pulse. He won't need the mirrors anymore. The idea cracked something inside his mind. Reflections had rules, boundaries, limits. If the man behind the mirror no longer needed them, then nothing separated Ethan from him. Not walls, not light, not distance. He staggered through the city streets, breath fogging in the cold air. The neon signs above him flickered, bending in unnatural patterns, as though reacting to some invisible pressure. Every reflective surface, car windows, puddles, shop fronts felt like an eye, a doorway, a mouth waiting to open. He kept his gaze on the ground. If he didn't see him, maybe he couldn't take more of him, but Ethan could feel the presence like a second heartbeat behind him. He ducked into an abandoned service tunnel beneath an old railway. Rusted pipes lined the ceiling. Dust hung in the air like drifting ash. What mattered most was that the tunnel was dark and matte, No reflections, no glass, just concrete and shadow. Ethan moved deeper until the city noise faded behind him. He collapsed beside a pillar, pressing his palms against cold stone. For a moment, just a moment, he felt the faintest sense of safety. Then he heard it, a soft tapping. Tap, tap, tap. He froze. The sound came not from behind him, nor ahead, but from everywhere, as if dozens of fingers drummed on hollow surfaces. He swallowed hard. "You're not here," he whispered. "You can't be here. There's nothing reflective." A low hum answered him, a vibration in the floor. The tapping slowed, then stretched, becoming a scrape. Long, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across an enormous sheet of glass. Except there was no glass. The scraping grew louder. Ethan backed against the pillar, heart hammering. His phone buzzed. He nearly threw it away, but desperation forced him to check. A new message from the same unknown number. "He doesn't need reflections when he knows your shape." Ethan's skin iced over. A second message appeared before he could breathe. "Look up." He didn't want to. Every instinct screamed not to, but terror made his muscles spasm, and his head lifted before he could stop himself. Above him, etched across the concrete ceiling, was a perfect silhouette of a tall, faceless man burned into the surface as if carved by heat and shadow. Its limbs were too long, stretching from wall to wall, fingers tapering into points. Then the silhouette moved, the arms stretched downward, pressing against the ceiling as if something massive crouched just above the concrete shell of the tunnel. Dust drifted down in small clouds. Ethan ran. He sprinted through the tunnel, lungs tearing for air. The scraping followed him, vibrating along the walls and floor. The silhouette overhead crawled, its limbs shifting with fluid, unnatural precision. Pipes rattled as though brushed by invisible limbs. He burst out of the tunnel, stumbling into an industrial yard lit by failing flood lamps. Old shipping containers stood stacked like silent sentinels. For a brief moment, the world looked normal again. No mirrors, no glass, no reflections except the faint glint on metal. Ethan ducked behind a container, panting. His legs trembled, his head spun. He pulled out his phone again, typing with frantic fingers. "What do you want from me?" The reply came instantly. "He wants to finish what you started." Ethan's breath caught. Started? I didn't start anything. But even as he typed it, he knew it wasn't true. He started when he wrote the story, when he recorded episode 2, when he looked too long into the mirror, when he acknowledged him. He had written the man behind the mirror into clarity, and now the entity wanted to complete the last piece, the physical form. The air shifted, metal groaned. Ethan stepped back, eyes scanning the yard. Something enormous moved behind the containers. A shadow stretched long, thin, bending around a corner in ways no shadow should move. It slithered upward across the steel surface, rising until it formed a towering mass. Then the container dented outward. A handprint, long fingers, too many joints. The metal bent again, harder, louder, as though something inside reality itself was pressing against the world, testing its strength. Ethan turned and bolted. He ran between containers, climbed a ladder, scrambled onto the top platform. Wind lashed against against him, carrying the metallic scent of rust. Below, shadows converged. Not one, not two, dozens. Shadows of him. They crawled across the ground like insects learning to stand. Their shapes flickered, unstable but gaining definition with every second. "No!" Ethan screamed into the night. "Stop! Leave me alone." His phone buzzed again. Running makes him learn faster. Ethan dropped the device. His throat was raw. His knees shook. Below, one shadow rose taller than the rest, stretching upward until it reached the height of the platform. A faceless head lifted, then slowly another arm formed. Ethan stumbled backward, slipping on the metal. His hands scraped against rust. He reached the edge of the platform and leaned out, staring down at the yard below. Every reflective surface steel. Puddles, phone screens left behind began to ripple. They were turning into mirrors. All of them, and inside each one, he stood, not dozens of reflections, one being, one consciousness, one shape, fracturing through every surface of reality. He lifted a hand, and every reflection lifted with him. Ethan screamed, and the mirrors began to crack. Ethan didn't know how long he stayed frozen at the edge of the platform, staring at the impossible truth unfolding below him. Reality was splitting open not with sound, but with silence so thick it pressed against his eardrums. The reflections shimmering across the puddles, metal sheets and screens pulsed like living wounds, and inside each one, the man behind the mirror pulled closer into the world Ethan once thought was real. The air grew colder, not natural cold, but the kind that felt like hands brushing across the bones under his skin. Ethan backed away from the edge, stumbling over the grated metal. His legs trembled uncontrollably. "This isn't happening. This can't be happening." But the reflections told him otherwise. They all moved at once. Every mirrored surface bent inward. Ripples distorted the light, stretching like thin elastic pulled too far. The figure inside the reflections leaned slowly, deliberately toward the world outside. His tall frame unfolded with unnatural grace, limbs lengthening beyond human proportion. Glass cracked, metal quivered, screens flickered in patterns like a heartbeat. Then the reflections went still, too still. Ethan's breath faltered. The entity moved, but only inside the reflections, not outside. Not yet. He was positioning himself, preparing. Ethan could feel it like static electricity gathering before lightning strikes. His phone buzzed on the platform beside him. The vibration jolted him out of his trance. He snatched the device, hands shaking, and read the newest message. "He's ready." Ethan's heart plummeted. Another message followed instantly. "He's waiting for you to look." He dropped the phone as if it burned him. He backed away until his spine hit the railing. His vision blurred at the edges. "No. I won't look at him. I won't." A long, slow creaking sound echoed from below. He froze. The puddle directly beneath the platform rippled outward in a perfect circle, as though something enormous had touched its center from the inside. Then a hand emerged. A long, jointed, pale hand flattened against the puddle's surface, as if testing the strength of a barrier. Fingers bent in unnatural, searching motions. Each movement left faint fractures of light across the water, like cracks spreading across a sheet of liquid glass. Ethan choked on a breath. "He's coming through." The hand pressed harder. The puddle bulged upward, forming a dome of water, stretching like a membrane, struggling to hold back the form beneath it. Ethan spun and ran. He raced across the platform, descending the ladder so fast he nearly slipped. His palms burned as metal raked his skin, but he didn't stop. The moment his feet hit the ground, he sprinted between containers, lungs screaming for air. But the air twisted around him. Shadows lengthened at impossible angles. Reflections formed where none should exist on rusted surfaces, on dust, on darkness itself. At first, they appeared faint, then clearer, then unmistakable. Each reflection showed him closer, clearer, more solid. Ethan skidded to a stop when he reached a dead end between two massive containers. The metal walls towered above him like cliffs. There was no escape. His pulse thundered in his ears. He turned slowly. The reflections on the container surfaces smoothed into mirror-like clarity, and the figure inside them stepped forward, not out of the mirrors, but inside them, mirroring Ethan's posture, learning his stance, learning his breath, learning him. Then the entity leaned closer to the reflective surfaces, so close, Ethan could see the faint outline of where a face should be. Smooth skin stretched over emptiness. No mouth, no nose, no eyes, nothing human. Yet he felt its gaze pierce him. Ethan stumbled backward. "Stop, please stop." A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the metal under his feet. His phone buzzed again. He didn't want to look, but he already knew what the message would say. He forced himself to raise the phone. "He doesn't need you to look anymore." Ethan's blood ran cold. A second message arrived before he could breathe. "Running made you visible." He spun around and bolted out of the dead end, ignoring the burning in his lungs. But the world twisted with him. The reflections turned as he turned. The shadows followed. The entity mimicked him with impossible precision. He reached the edge of the industrial yard and stumbled into a dark lot behind an abandoned warehouse. Broken windows lined the building like empty eye sockets. And then the ground reflected, not water, not glass. Reality itself shimmered beneath his feet. The world split below like a second layer, duplicating his form in perfect clarity. His reflection lay beneath him, staring upward. At first, it copied him, then it hesitated, then it moved on its own. Ethan screamed and jumped back. His reflection rose from the shimmering surface, not physically, but visually, like a copy peeling itself free from the world below. Its limbs stretched, bending at wrong angles as it pulled upward. Then a second figure formed behind it. Tall, faceless, the true one, the man behind the mirror. He stepped closer to Ethan's reflection, placing a hand on its shoulder, as if guiding a child. Then Ethan felt a hand on his real shoulder. Ice flooded his veins. He turned slowly, nothing behind him, but he still felt the handprint burning cold into his skin. The reflection below smiled. Not Ethan, not human, something wearing his shape. The faceless figure leaned in closer to Ethan's emerging double, touching the place where a face should be. And with slow, deliberate precision, he began to carve a mouth, a wide, unnatural, stretching smile. Ethan stumbled back, tripping over debris, falling hard to the ground. His breath left him in a cracked sob. His phone buzzed beside him. One final message appeared. When he finishes, you won't exist in this world anymore. The reflections began to crack, and the smile widened. Ethan didn't remember how he got back on his feet. Terror had become a numb, half-frozen thing inside him, too large to feel all at once, too heavy to escape. The world around him swayed, warped by the reflections cracking open beneath his feet. The smile carved into his mirrored double lingered in his mind like a wound that wouldn't close. Every breath tasted like cold glass dust. He stumbled backward from the shimmering ground, his heartbeat hammering with erratic force. The reflections continued to shift, widening like a dark sea beneath a thin film of reality. He forced himself to look away, knowing one more second staring into that false version of himself might be enough for the man behind the mirror to pull him through entirely. The warehouse loomed behind him, a towering skeleton of broken windows and rusted beams. He pushed himself toward it, each step sluggish and uneven, his legs barely responding. He didn't know why he believed the inside would be safer, maybe because the glass here was shattered, because the mirrors were broken, maybe because he had nowhere left to run. He entered through a collapsed doorway, ducking beneath warped metal. The air inside was thick with dust and the faint metallic scent of old machinery. Darkness filled the corners like liquid, shifting with the slightest movement of light. Ethan's footsteps echoed off the concrete floor as he pressed deeper inside. The warehouse ceiling had collapsed in places, letting thin beams of moonlight carve pale streaks across the floor. But even that light felt wrong bent, stretched, shimmering in a way moonlight shouldn't. He realized with a sick twist of dread that he was no longer seeing raw light. He was seeing reflections of something above him, something that wasn't the sky. He refused to look up. A sound drifted across the room, a soft tapping, delicate as fingertips on glass. He froze, heart seizing. The sound came again, tap, tap, followed by a slow, dragging scrape. He backed away until he hit a wall. His breathing turned shallow. No, stop, please. The tapping shifted direction. It was no longer coming from one place. It came from everywhere. From empty air, from the cracked concrete, from inside the walls themselves. Then something moved in the darkness. A shadow detached itself from the far side of the warehouse floor, unfolding with impossible grace. It rose tall, much taller than before, and its edges wavered like heat rippling off metal. But it wasn't just a shadow now. It had depth, shape, weight. The man behind the mirror was stepping more fully into the world. Pieces of him, learning, adapting, perfecting. Ethan scrambled sideways behind an overturned workbench. His hands shook violently as he covered his mouth, trying to quiet the ragged gasps. Through the gaps in the metal, he watched the figure shift. The shadow elongated, thinning and widening, splitting in places like a smear dragged across wet ink. Then it reformed, and took a step, not toward Ethan, but toward a broken, hanging piece of reflective metal dangling from a beam. He reached out with a long arm, too many joints bending in slow, deliberate motion, and touched the metal surface. The reflection inside shimmered, then changed. The distorted image inside now showed a perfect, clear version of the entity's form, a tall humanoid with long limbs, smooth blank face, and a posture that looked almost human. Almost. Ethan clamped a hand over his mouth to avoid screaming. The entity was practicing its shape, perfecting it. He backed away slowly, crawling on the floor to stay out of sight. He reached a corner where sacks of cement and broken crates formed a small alcove. He curled behind them, gripping his phone like a lifeline. The screen lit up with a soft glow. A new message appeared from the same number. He's no longer trapped in reflections. Ethan's stomach dropped. Another message appeared instantly. Now he uses them to shape himself. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. Tears slipped out, running cold down his face. His breath shook. "I don't want to die," he whispered. A third message appeared. "You won't." A pause. "Not if he takes your place first." Ethan felt the world tilt. A fourth message appeared. "He's almost done." He wanted to throw the phone, smash it, run until the world ended. But before he could react, a sound rose in the room, a deep, resonant vibration that shook dust from the ceiling. Something heavy dragged across the floor. He peeked over the crate. The entity was no longer alone. His reflection, Ethan's mirrored double, stood beside him. Perfect posture, perfect stance, but with the carved smile stretched across its face. The faceless man reached out, placing a hand on the double's head. The double leaned forward with unnatural obedience. Then, the entity placed its other hand on its chest and pushed. The mirrored double convulsed. Its limbs spasmed, twisting violently. The smile widened until cracks formed at the edges of its face. Ethan gagged, unable to look away. The double began to change. Its skin rippled like cloth underwater. His face warped. The smile crawled upward, splitting the cheeks. The eyes turned black and hollow. It wasn't Ethan anymore. It was a corrupted version, something made for this world by something outside it. Ethan pressed himself deeper into the corner. Panting, he felt the world closing around him, tightening like a fist. His phone vibrated one last time. He looked down with dread. The message read, "When he finishes, he will step out." Ethan looked up again. The corrupted double turned toward him, slowly, deliberately, and smiled. The reflections around the room began to crack. Reality followed. Ethan didn't scream, not because he wasn't terrified, but because terror had hollowed him out so completely that sound couldn't escape. The corrupted double stood before him, its limbs trembling with an unnatural eagerness, its carved smile stretching farther than a mouth should ever stretch. The hollow eyes fixed on him not with recognition, but with hunger. It was a creature wearing his outline like wet fabric. The warehouse air thickened, vibrating with the pressure of something vast, pushing against thin reality. The man behind the mirror drifted behind the double, his tall frame flickering in and out of solidity. Each flicker showed him more defined, more formed, more real. Ethan crawled backward until his spine struck a metal beam. His breath hitched. His chest tightened. The double tilted its head, mimicking the motion in an exaggerated way, as if testing how Ethan's body language could be used. Its neck bent too far, joints rotating with soft cracking sounds. "No," Ethan whispered. "Don't come closer." But the double didn't obey him. It obeyed him. The entity's long, hand-like shape rested on the double's shoulder, a gesture almost affectionate. Then the double stepped forward, jerky at first, then smoother as its limbs adjusted to imitation. Ethan scrambled up, stumbling as he ran deeper into the warehouse, weaving between toppled crates and rusted machinery. Shadows bent toward him like reaching arms. Every reflective scrap of metal produced distorted flashes of his own image, each one smiling. He reached an open service corridor, its concrete walls stained with age and neglect. Pipes ran overhead like ribs. He sprinted down the hallway, heart pounding, desperate for distance, for a place the double couldn't follow. But behind him came the sound of mirrored footsteps, echoes that didn't match his rhythm. Faster, hungrier, he burst into a small room lined with shattered windows. Moonlight poured in through the broken frames, catching on floating dust. He froze. The reflections were everywhere. Even shattered glass reflects. Dozens of tiny, jagged surfaces glimmered like fragments of a broken dimension, each one containing a piece of him, the faceless figure and the smiling double stitched together across the shards. He backed against the far wall as the reflections began to move. Not the glass, the figures inside the glass. Each shard displayed a different angle of the double's face, the smile widening in one, twitching in another, trembling with anticipation in a third. The man behind the mirror appeared in slivers, an arm here, a blank head there, a long hand tracing the inside of the glass as if looking for a weak spot to break through. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. He couldn't escape if he kept looking. He couldn't survive if he didn't. A faint vibration ran through the floor. The sound of footsteps approached, slow and scraping. Ethan forced his eyes open. The double stepped into the room, its body framed in moonlight. Its smile continued to stretch, now splitting the cheeks with faint, tearing cracks. The flesh didn't bleed. It separated like thin paper being pulled apart. The man behind the mirror lingered in the shattered window reflections, observing, waiting, guiding. Ethan slid along the wall, trying to get around the double. "Please," he begged, voice cracking. "You don't need me. I didn't know this would happen." The double followed him, matching his movements with perfect, predatory precision. Its hands twitched, fingers too long, bending in anticipation. Then it lunged. Ethan dove aside, crashing into an old workbench. Tools spilled across the floor with a loud metallic clatter. A mirror-like sheet of polished metal slid out from beneath a pile of scrap. Ethan's reflection flashed in it. Only it wasn't his. It was the double's reflection. And behind that reflection, the man behind the mirror leaned forward, pressing both palms against the inside of the metal surface. The metal bulged. Ethan scrambled backward, knocking over shelves as he ran into the darkest corner of the room. The double approached, but its movements had changed, less confident now, almost slow, as if waiting, as if following unseen instructions. Ethan's phone buzzed. He lifted it with trembling hands. A new message. He wants you to stop running. Another message instantly followed. He needs you still. Ethan's breath shook. His hands trembled so hard, the phone nearly slipped from his grip. What does that mean? He whispered. The reply came. If you run. He can't finish the copy. Ethan's heartbeat faltered. The smile, the shaping, the imitation of his posture. The double wasn't complete yet. He tightened his grip on the phone. Why me? For the first time, the typing indicator appeared on the mysterious number, slow, deliberate dots blinking on the screen. A message finally appeared. Because you saw him first. The lights flickered overhead. The double's head snapped toward Ethan with violent speed, the smile tearing wider with a sickening rip. Ethan bolted. He shoved past stacks of debris, squeezing through a narrow doorway into another corridor. Pipes hissed overhead. The walls vibrated with pressure like something crawling inside them. He reached a metal stairwell and began climbing. Each step echoed like thunder. Behind him came the scratching of fingers on concrete. By the time he reached the upper level, he was breathless. His body screamed for rest, but the corridor here was lined with glass cabinets, old industrial displays, their surfaces coated in dust. Even dusted glass reflects. He turned his head just enough to see. Every reflection showed his face, not the double's, his, the faceless entity. But now, he had a mouth, no eyes, no nose, just a wide, unnatural mouth stretching too far across a smooth, blank face. Ethan staggered backward in horror. Behind him, the double stepped into the corridor. Its face matched the reflection perfectly. Not Ethan's face, not a human face. The face of the man behind the mirror. The copy was almost complete. Ethan collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Please, don't take me. His phone buzzed one last time. He lifted it slowly, terrified of what he'd see. The message read, when he takes your place, you will live where he came from. Ethan looked up. The double leaned over him, and the world around them began to crack like glass. Ethan didn't feel the ground beneath him anymore. The moment the double leaned over him, reality wavered like thin ice bending under a heavy weight. The cracked surfaces around him shimmered and folded inward, distorting the warehouse into a fractured mosaic. Each shard of visual reality showed a different angle of the nightmare. The double's twisted grin, the faceless figure behind him, Ethan's own terrified face stretched across broken reflections that no longer matched his movements. His breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. Panic clawed up his throat. The double lowered itself, tilting its head with unnatural fluidity. Its new mouth wide, deep and dark, opened slowly, as if savoring its first imitation of expression. The hollow sound that escaped wasn't a voice. It was a distorted echo of Ethan's scream, stretched thin and played backward. It leaned closer, its fingers reaching for Ethan's face. Then everything snapped. The world split with a deafening, pressureless crack. Ethan was thrown backward, sliding across shattered concrete as the floor beneath him rippled like water hit by a stone. The double staggered, its limbs glitching, flickering between shapes, like a puppet caught in crossed strings. The reflections across the walls and broken windows pulsed violently. The man behind the mirror stepped forward, not out of any one reflection, out of all of them. His form rose, tall and impossible, stitched together from every reflective surface in the warehouse. One arm came from a broken window, one leg from a metal sheet, his torso from a cracked mirror, his head from the shimmering ground itself. The pieces blended together until the figure stood as one whole being, faceless no longer. He had a mouth now, a mouth stretched across too much of his head, curving upward in a permanent, silent scream of delight. Ethan scrambled backward until his shoulders hit a rusted pillar. The pressure behind his eyes throbbed, his vision blurred. The entity's presence swallowed the room, thick and suffocating. Every step the figure took made the air warp like heat waves. The shadows along the walls curled inward, like they were bowing to him. The double moved beside the entity, stabilizing again with a jerking motion. Its smile matched the entity's perfectly. 2 mouths, no eyes, no humanity. Ethan's phone vibrated in his pocket. It felt absurd tiny, human, irrelevant against the weight of what stood before him. His trembling fingers pulled it out. One message: don't let him touch you. Then another: if he touches you, you'll become the reflection. Ethan's heart seized. The double lunged first. Ethan rolled aside as its elongated arm slammed into the floor. Cracking concrete, he crawled beneath a half-collapsed workbench, dragging himself into the shadows. The entity didn't chase. It didn't need to. It simply stepped closer, each motion precise, slow, thoughtful, like it was studying how to walk now that it had fully learned its shape. The reflections around the room darkened, forming black voids that pulsed like breathing wounds. Something shifted inside those voids, hands pushing against them from the inside, eager to break through. The double reached under the workbench, fingers grasping for Ethan's ankle. Ethan kicked violently, connecting with its arm. The limb bent backward at an impossible angle, but the double didn't flinch. Its smile only widened before it twisted its arm back into place with a sickening crack. Ethan bolted from beneath the workbench, sprinting toward the far exit of the warehouse. His legs burned. His lungs screamed. Behind him, he heard the scraping sound of limbs dragging unnaturally across the ground. But the exit door didn't lead outside. When he burst through it, the world shattered. He fell into darkness, a darkness that reflected. He was standing on nothing, a mirror-like void beneath his feet stretched infinitely. Above him, below him, everywhere reflections, but not his own. Each surface showed the man behind the mirror in different stages of formation, some tall and perfect, some broken, some with too many limbs, some with too many mouths. One reflection showed Ethan standing still, but he wasn't standing still. The reflection was its head tilted slowly, as if noticing him for the first time. Then it began to walk toward him. Ethan stumbled back, slipping on the smooth nothingness beneath him. The reflection followed, its motions perfect, too perfect. The reflections around them began to move as well, like a crowd closing in. The void vibrated. A crack formed beneath Ethan's feet. Then another. The reflection lunged. Ethan screamed and ran, but the void offered no grip. His feet slid across the reflective surface. He fell to his knees. Behind him, he heard the reflection's mouth open and empty, yawning sound pulling at the edges of reality. A voice echoed across the void, not from the sky, not from the reflections, from inside Ethan's head. "You saw me first." The man behind the mirror rose behind Ethan's reflection, towering, now fully formed across every mirrored dimension. His long hand extended toward Ethan, fingers forming as they reached, joints clicking into place. Ethan's phone buzzed. He lifted it with shaking hands. The message: "If he touches you here, you won't go back." Ethan pushed himself up, forcing his legs to move, sprinting across the cracking, reflective void. Each step broke more of the world beneath him, shards dropping into black nothingness. Behind him, the reflections screamed, a sound like metal twisting through bone. The man behind the mirror moved faster now. The void shattered again. Ethan jumped and fell and hit solid ground. He was back in the warehouse, but not alone. The double landed beside him, smile intact. The man behind the mirror stepped through the last intact reflection in the room, and the glass finally shattered. The world flickered, and everything went dark. Darkness swallowed everything. Not the absence of light. This was something deeper, heavier, as if the world had been folded into a space where light itself no longer existed. Ethan floated in it, weightless, breathless, unsure if he was alive or suspended in some frozen frame of time. He reached out, but his hands touched nothing. No air, no ground, no reality. Then something moved in the darkness. A faint ripple, a shifting pressure, like fingers brushing the back of his mind. He wasn't alone here. He never had been. The darkness cracked. Thin lines of pale, ghost-like light spread outward, fracturing the void like shattered glass. Ethan dropped suddenly, falling, or being pulled, and hit cold ground with a force that knocked the breath from his lungs. He gasped and opened his eyes. He was back in the warehouse, but the warehouse was different. It was frozen in a moment that shouldn't exist. Dust hung motionless in the air. The shadows were too still. The reflections shattered glass, metal fragments. The gleaming floor no longer showed the room. They showed him dozens of Ethans, hundreds, each reflection staring back with lifeless stillness. His heartbeat stuttered. Some of the reflected Ethans moved a fraction too late. Others blinked when he didn't. Some didn't blink at all. Some smiled. One smiled wider than the rest. Ethan stumbled back, tripping over debris. No. He wasn't just being copied, he was being replaced. A low hum filled the room, vibrating through the floor. The air shifted, thick with an unnatural presence. Then he saw it. Across the warehouse stood the double, but it wasn't the same as before. Its form had solidified skin no longer rippled like liquid, but stretched smoothly across its frame. The smile carved across its face was sharper, wider, cleaner. It no longer twitched. It no longer cracked. It simply existed, confident and complete. And behind it, the man behind the mirror. He was enormous now, nearly touching the ceiling. His long limbs hung like shadows heavier than matter itself. His wide mouth stretched with a silent, triumphant expression, no longer learning, no longer forming. He was finished. Ethan's pulse hammered so hard it hurt. The double stepped forward. Ethan took a shaky step back. The reflections around the room shifted with him, each one displaying the double instead of him. He was losing his reflection entirely. The double raised a hand, its fingers too many, too long, bending with unnatural grace. Ethan turned and ran. He sprinted across the warehouse floor, dodging broken beams and twisted metal. Every reflective surface showed the double gaining on him, even when he didn't hear footsteps behind him. Reality echoed a different truth than the one he could see. He barreled through a side door and into another long corridor. The walls were lined with pipes and sheets of dull steel, no glass. Good. He could breathe. Then the steel began to shine, slowly, painfully, like metal remembering it once knew how to reflect. Ethan's reflection appeared faintly blurry, dark, distorted. A second reflection appeared beside it, the double, and the double's smile widened. "Stop!" Ethan gasped, slamming his hand against the metal. The reflection rippled. A voice echoed behind him. Not spoken, not heard. Felt. "You let me in." Ethan spun, back pressed to the steel wall. The man behind the mirror stood at the end of the corridor, towering, his limbs scraping along the walls as he moved. His presence bent the corridor itself, altering perspective, making it hard to know how far or close he was. The air around him darkened, dimming the light above them. Ethan darted down another hallway, turning blindly, desperate to escape the entity's looming shadow. He burst into an open room filled with old machinery and dusty monitors stacked against a wall. Monitors, screens, reflections. They flickered to life one by one. Every monitor showed Ethan's face, then the man behind the mirrors. Then both faces merged. Ethan screamed and threw a loose pipe at one of the screens. It shattered, sparks flashing, but the reflections didn't vanish. They simply spilled across the ground like liquid glass. The double stepped into the room. Its smile never changed. "What do you want from me?" Ethan cried. The double tilted its head. It moved its jaw slow, deliberate, and for the first time, it spoke. But the voice wasn't Ethan's. It was a layered sound. Multiple versions of Ethan's voice speaking at once, slightly delayed, mismatched in pitch, merging into something grotesque. "Your place." Ethan froze. "My place," he whispered weakly. The double took another step. The warehouse lights flickered, casting long shadows. "You were the first," the voice said. "The first to see him, the first to give him shape, the first door." Ethan stumbled back. I didn't mean." "You opened the mirror." The man behind the mirror entered the room fully now, towering behind the double like a god claiming its creation. His presence pressed Ethan to his knees, suffocating, crushing, overwhelming. The reflections on the monitors began to fracture, one by one. They showed Ethan being replaced, his face peeling away into the double's smile. "No!" Ethan screamed, covering his face. The double crouched in front of him, its fingers brushing the edge of his jaw. cold, wrong, burning. Ethan shoved it away. Stumbling to his feet, he ran again, bursting through a far door into a stairwell. He climbed, 2 steps at a time, legs trembling, lungs on fire. The stairwell ended at a rooftop access door. He threw it open and stumbled into the night air. The rooftop stretched wide beneath a sky of fractured clouds. Wind whipped at his clothes. City lights glimmered in distorted halos. For a moment, he thought he was safe. Then every window in the city reflected him. Every building surface gleamed with his image. Every shadow lengthened, pointing toward the rooftop like fingers. Ethan's phone buzzed. One message: there is nowhere without mirrors. Ethan dropped the phone. The rooftop air thickened, shimmering with reflective distortions. The double emerged behind him. The man behind the mirror rose like a towering eclipse. Ethan turned to face them both, tears streaking down his face. "Please," he whispered, "please don't take me." The double reached toward him. The mirrors cracked, and the rooftop collapsed into reflection. Ethan fell, not through air, not through space, but through reflection. The rooftop dissolved beneath his feet like cracking glass, each fracture glowing with cold white light, before collapsing into a shimmering abyss. His body twisted in weightless freefall, the world spiraling around him in distorted fragments. Pieces of the city, of the warehouse, of himself shattered into brilliant shards that drifted like dying embers. He reached out instinctively, but his fingers touched nothing, only the smooth, icy surface of unreality. He wasn't falling into another world. He was falling into the space behind all worlds, a place reflections belonged, a place he ruled. The darkness swallowed him whole, but unlike before, this darkness had texture. It pulsed, it breathed, it whispered. Something brushed past his arm, cold, slick, like fingers made of smoke and water. Another touch grazed his leg. Then a hand gripped his wrist. Ethan gasped, twisting sharply, but he wasn't pulled deeper. He was pulled upward. His body jerked violently as he crashed onto solid ground. He coughed, chest spasming. The cold surface beneath him felt like polished stone. He pushed himself upright, dizzy and trembling. When his vision cleared, he realized he was no longer in the city. He stood inside an enormous circular chamber made entirely of reflective surfaces. The walls weren't walls. They were endless mirrors, stretching into infinity. The ceiling was a dome of mirrored sky. The floor reflected him from every angle, creating a dizzying, disorienting illusion. But none of the reflections matched him. Some showed him older, some younger, some screaming, some smiling, some staring back with hollow, black eyes. A single reflection looked exactly like him. It didn't move. It blinked once. Ethan stumbled backward, heart racing. "What is this place?" he whispered. His voice echoed infinitely, each echo distorting slightly until the sound resembled dozens of whispers speaking back to him. This was his domain, the mirror hall, the birthplace of every reflection. A soft, crackling sound echoed behind him. He turned. A familiar outline emerged from a fractured doorway, his corrupted double. Its smile had grown impossibly wide, splitting skin that didn't bleed. Its limbs twitched with mechanical sharpness. Its hollow eyes locked onto him with predatory focus. The double stepped forward. Then another footstep followed. A towering shadow filled the doorway. The man behind the mirror ducked beneath the arch, his limbs folding unnaturally so he could enter. His tall form straightened, rising to full, horrifying height. The mirrored dome reflected him thousands of times over, multiplying his presence. Ethan felt every reflection watching him. The entity moved slowly, elegantly, like a puppet master stepping onto a stage. The reflections reacted instantly. Every mirrored Ethan stepped backward. Every mirrored double stepped forward. Every mirrored version of the entity began to tilt its head in unison. Ethan pressed himself against the mirrored wall. His reflection contorted, stretching as if the surface itself wanted to swallow him. The double approached him, its smile twitching. Ethan darted sideways, sprinting across the chamber. His footsteps echoed like shattering glass, but the room warped with each step, the mirrors bending, stretching, shifting like fluid. He wasn't running through a room. He was running through a maze of reflections. Every direction looked identical. Every corner mirrored infinity. Every turn returned him to another version of himself, some trapped behind the surface. Pounding silently, begging for release, Ethan clamped his hands over his ears. The whispers were growing louder, filling his head with broken versions of his own voice. Come back. Let him in. Your place. Our place. You opened the mirror. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed. Then the floor beneath him rippled. He jumped back as a massive hand pressed through the mirrored surface, cracking it outward like pushing through ice. Fingers too long, too many joints, clawed at the air. He turned and ran again, but something changed. For the first time, the mirrors didn't reflect the double. They reflected him, only him. The man behind the mirror filled every surface now, his form stretching across angles and dimensions Ethan couldn't comprehend. His wide mouth curled upward, and even though it made no sound, Ethan felt the laugh reverberate through the chamber. The temperature dropped suddenly. Ice began to spread across the mirrored floor. Not normal ice, shaped like branching cracks. Cracks that grew toward him. Cracks that followed him. Cracks that wanted him. His phone vibrated. Ethan froze. He shouldn't have had his phone. It should have shattered. It should have disappeared. But it lay glowing in his palm, screen lit with a message. He can't finish the copy without your last reflection. Ethan stared at the mirrors. His reflection, the real one, was still there. Only one. Every other reflection was wrong, distorted, empty, tainted. His real reflection blinked again, slowly, deliberately, and then it smiled. Not wide and monstrous like the double, but Ethan's smile, his real smile. Ethan's blood froze. The reflection was alive, acting independent, learning him, replacing him. He stepped back, shaking his head. No, you can't. The reflection reached toward the inside of the mirror. Ethan fell backward, scrambling. The double appeared behind him, blocking his escape. Its long fingers curled around his shoulder, cold enough to burn. Ethan cried out, twisting free, stumbling across the circular chamber toward the lone reflection that still looked exactly like him. The man behind the mirror stepped into his path. His arrival cracked the floor, reflections rippling outward like a shockwave. Ethan collapsed to the ground. The reflection stepped through the mirror. The surface rippled like water, and Ethan met himself. But it wasn't him, not anymore. It opened its eyes, his eyes, and spoke in his exact voice. "I'm finished." Ethan crawled backward. "You're not me." The reflection tilted its head gently. "Not yet." Its hand extended toward him. Fingers identical. Precise. Perfect. "I only need one more thing." Ethan's voice trembled. "What?" The reflection leaned closer, whispering, "Your place." The man behind the mirror opened his mouth wider than any human jaw could, shadows pouring from the darkness inside. The double seized Ethan's arms. The reflection seized his throat. The mirrors all around began to crack, and the chamber screamed. The chamber screamed. It wasn't sound, not exactly. It was pressure, vibration, a tearing sensation that pulsed through Ethan's bones as every mirror in the endless dome fractured at once. Shards trembled in their frames, reflections rippling like disturbed water. The double's grip tightened around Ethan's arms, long fingers digging into his skin with unnatural strength. The reflection, his perfect copy, held his throat with a cold precision, its eyes identical yet empty, its smile growing more confident with every second. Behind them all, the man behind the mirror expanded, his limbs stretched into the ceiling, dissolving into dark, liquid reflections. His mouth gaped open wider than before, an abyss of shadow pulling the chamber inward with a soundless force, a gravitational hunger that bent the mirrored world toward him. The double leaned close, its forehead nearly touching Ethan's. When it spoke, its voice was Ethan's voice, perfectly layered, perfectly stolen but wrong in a way that curdled his stomach. "You don't belong here anymore." Ethan gasped for breath, clawing at the reflection's grip. This isn't me." "You're not me." The reflection tilted its head gently, as if amused. "Not yet." Its fingers tightened. Black spots clouded Ethan's vision. His knees buckled. The chamber's fractured surfaces flickered with dozens of versions of himself losing consciousness. Then a distortion tore through the chamber, not from the entity, not from the double, from Ethan. The mirrored floor beneath them vibrated violently, and the double staggered, its grip loosening just long enough for Ethan to wrench free. He dropped to the ground, coughing violently, crawling backward until his hands pressed against the cold mirror wall. The reflection looked surprised. For the first time, the man behind the mirror paused, his towering form tilted, mouth snapping shut with a chilling sound like bone scraping bone. Ethan pushed himself upright, shaking. "I don't belong here," he whispered. "Because this isn't my world." The reflection stared. Ethan continued, voice cracking but growing steadier. "You brought me here. This place is made for you, not for me." The reflection twitched, its smile faltering. For the first time, Ethan realized something. This dimension was built around reflection, around mimicry, around rules the entity understood. But Ethan did not, and because of that, Ethan was unpredictable here. He staggered along the mirrored wall, and the surface rippled beneath his touch like water. Dozens of misaligned reflections trembled violently, reacting to him like an unstable frequency. The double lunged. Ethan dove sideways, rolling across the fragmented floor. The chamber peeled backward, revealing shifting corridors of infinite reflections, each one bending into impossible geometry. Ethan sprinted into one of them, the path tearing open as he entered, closing behind him like a mouth swallowing light. He ran blindly, breath sharp, legs shaking beneath him. Each step echoed through the mirrored corridors like an endless loop. Every mirrored wall flickered with distorted reflections of him melting, warping, stretching. Some reflections screamed silently. Some reached out in pleading gestures. Others stared with empty expressions. Ethan kept running. A low hum began to rise. The double was coming. Its footsteps were wrong. Too many limbs hitting the mirrored ground at once, each impact sending ripples across the reflective surfaces. Shadows bent around it, reflections bent toward it. Ethan darted into another chamber, smaller, circular, with a single towering reflective pillar at its center. The pillar pulsed with light, its surface swirling with amorphous shapes. He approached slowly, breath trembling. His reflection appeared, perfect, clear, calm. It wasn't attacking, it simply looked at him. He lifted his hand. The reflection lifted its hand, but a beat too late. Not perfectly synced, not fully aligned. It wasn't his true reflection. A voice echoed behind him. "He's almost done." Ethan spun, seeing the reflection copy from the previous chamber, his nearly complete double emerging through the mirror wall, as though stepping through water. Its smile returned, eyes fixed on him with growing hunger. "Stop!" Ethan whispered. "You don't have to." The reflection shook its head. "It's already decided." The man behind the mirror appeared behind it, towering through a tear in the reflective world. His limbs stretched like liquid shadows. His wide mouth curled in a grotesque grin. The mirrored floor distorted beneath Ethan's feet as the entity's presence bent space inward. Ethan backed up to the pillar, pressing both hands against its cool surface. And something happened. The pillar responded. Light exploded outward, shattering the distorted reflections swirling within it. For a brief moment, the surface showed only one reflection. Ethan, his true self, not corrupted, not replaced. The reflection spoke, a whisper, a plea. "Run!" Ethan's breath caught. "Run where?" The reflection extended its hand toward the mirrored floor, and the surface rippled, revealing a pathway made of fractured light. The double screeched, a sound like breaking glass run backward. It lunged again, limbs twisting in unnatural arcs. Ethan sprinted onto the glowing path, the reflections beneath him cracking with each footstep. The path bent downward into darkness like a spiral of broken moonlight. Behind him, the double gave chase, its elongated limbs scraping sparks from the reflective walls as it lunged faster. Faster! The man behind the mirror followed. He didn't run. He simply existed in every reflection behind Ethan, flickering closer with each heartbeat. Ethan stumbled into another chamber, this one smaller, dimmer, its walls blackened as though burned. The reflections here were weak, distorted, fading. He collapsed to his knees. Gasping, the double entered behind him, its smile splitting wider, exposing a mouth far too deep. The man behind the mirror rose behind it, filling the chamber with shadow. Ethan forced himself gripping a broken shard of reflection from the floor. The shard pulsed, glowing faintly. His true reflection appeared inside it. You can break what he builds. The double lunged. Ethan raised the shard. The chamber shattered with blinding light. Light exploded through the chamber as Ethan raised the glowing shard. For a moment, just one suspended instant, the mirrored world froze. Every reflection, every distorted copy, every version of the man behind the mirror halted mid-motion. The double's twisted limbs hung in the air like a corrupted marionette cut from its strings. Then the light shattered outward. The walls cracked into blinding fractures, each spreading like jagged spider webs through the infinite mirrored dome. Ethan shielded his eyes, staggering back as reflections burst like glass balloons. Dozens, no, thousands of warped versions of himself flickered violently and vanished. Only one reflection remained, his true self. It stared back at him through the swirling haze of fractured light, but not with fear, with urgency. The shard dimmed in Ethan's hand, its glow fading into a pulsing ember. Behind him came a deep, resonant vibration, an inhuman sound rising like a chorus of cracking glass. The double began to move again, its smile too wide, too sharp, stretched across its face as its limbs hissed against the fractured ground. Its jaw unhinged slightly, trembling with a trembling, glitch-like distortion. It launched toward Ethan. Ethan swung the shard instinctively. The shard connected with the double's arm, slicing across its surface. Instead of flesh, the wound revealed a hollow interior filled with swirling reflection, the substance of the mirrored world itself. The double screeched, its voice a distorted cacophony of Ethan's own vocal tones played in reverse. Ethan stumbled backward, gripping the shard tighter. The man behind the mirror rose behind the double. He didn't stand. He unfolded, limbs stretching like flowing ink, body expanding into an impossible height that reached beyond the chamber's dome. Reflections bent around him, pulling inward, distorting the very geometry of the world. His mouth stretched wider, a black doorway into pure void. Ethan felt the force of it pulling him forward, tugging at his limbs, his breath, his thoughts. The shard grew warm, then hot, vibrating like a heartbeat in his hand. A whisper echoed across the fractured chamber. "Use it." Ethan looked down. His true reflection had appeared again, this time not in a single mirror, but in the glowing fractures that spread across the floor. Its mouth formed the word silently. "Break it." The double lunged once more, limbs snapping into sharp, unnatural angles as it pursued him. Ethan dodged, rolling across the shifting mirrored floor. Every surface flickered with the entity's face now. Every reflection unified into one infinite version of him. The man behind the mirror stepped closer. The chamber's temperature dropped instantly. Frost spread across the mirrored surfaces, branching into frozen tendrils that crept toward Ethan like icy fingers. His breath turned to fog. His skin burned with cold. The shard pulsed brighter. Ethan turned, sprinting across the chamber. The double crawled along the walls behind him like a twisted spider, its limbs allowing it to bend around impossible angles. It moved silently now, its smile widening as Ethan ran. He reached a fractured pillar, one of the last reflective structures still intact. Its surface rippled weakly, barely clinging to coherence. The reflection inside it stared at Ethan, his true self. Ethan pressed the shard to the pillar. The world inhaled. The shard flared, and the pillar cracked. A shockwave ripped through the chamber, sending the double flying backward. Its limbs contorted mid-air, twisting into new configurations before it slammed into the opposite wall. The blow didn't kill it, but it disoriented the creature long enough for Ethan to catch his breath. The man behind the mirror leaned down, his enormous form bending like flowing shadow to observe Ethan directly. His mouth inched closer, widening into a grotesque curve. Ethan felt his consciousness slipping, his thoughts blurred. His reflection, the true one, appeared beside him on the floor, rippling like a projection cast from beneath the surface. "Break the world," it mouthed. Ethan clenched the shard. He understood. This place wasn't real, not in the way the physical world was. It was made of rules, reflections, mimicry, an elaborate prison of mirrored logic. And if something was made, it could be unmade. Ethan ran. He charged toward the largest fracture in the chamber, a crack that split the mirrored dome in two. The double shrieked and leaped after him, its limbs stretching and splintering into multiple branching shapes. Ethan reached the crack. The shard pulsed in his hand like a heartbeat. He swung. The shard made contact. The world shattered. The crack exploded outward, spreading in a blinding flash across the walls. The pillars, the floor, the ceiling, everything broke. Every surface splintered into shards of floating glass. The chamber fragmented into hundreds of suspended pieces, each showing a different sliver of reality. The double convulsed mid-air, its form tearing apart into ribbons of reflection. The man behind the mirror screamed not through his mouth, but through every reflection in the universe. His form flickered, stretched, and then snapped, dissolving into black ribbons that were sucked into the void behind his collapsing shape. Ethan fell, but not into darkness, into light. He hit solid ground with a gasp. The world around him spun, blurry and sunlit. He blinked hard, squinting against the brightness. He smelled dust, oil, metal. He was back in the warehouse, the real one. Broken windows, rusted beams, silence. He dropped to his knees, chest heaving, eyes burning with tears of shock and relief. The shard, now fully dark, crumbled in his hand. He looked at his reflection in a cracked piece of metal on the floor. It was him, only him. No smile, no delay, no flicker. He exhaled, shaking uncontrollably. Then the reflection blinked. A moment before he did, Ethan froze. The reflection inside the cracked metal surface blinked before he did too fast, too smooth, too intentional. His breath hitched, His pulse quickened, and a cold shiver laced down his spine. He stepped back, eyes locked on the warped piece of metal lying among the debris. "No," he whispered. "No, you're gone. I destroyed you. I broke the mirror world. You're gone." But the reflection smiled, a tiny, subtle curl of the lips, not the monstrous split of the double, but something eerily familiar. His smile. Ethan's knees trembled. He staggered backward until his shoulder hit a rusted support beam. The warehouse around him, the real warehouse, felt solid, grounded, steady. Dust drifted through sunlight. Rusted metal groaned softly in the breeze. None of it comforted him, not when the reflection in the broken metal didn't follow his movements, not when it kept smiling. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing himself to breathe. It's stress, shock, trauma. I'm seeing things. He opened his eyes. The reflection wasn't smiling now. It was standing, fully standing in the metal, its face expressionless, its posture perfect. Ethan stumbled backward, heart pounding violently. The piece of metal didn't move, but the reflection inside it shifted closer, its form sharpening in a way that made the surface ripple like disturbed water. Then the reflection lifted its hand. Ethan didn't. He froze, breath trapped in his throat. The reflection mouthed a single word. Soon, the metal shattered. The reflection vanished. Ethan gasped, stumbling away from the fragments as they clattered across the floor. His chest tightened. His hands shook uncontrollably. The world he'd escaped from had seeped back through the cracks, through the smallest reflective surface. He was not free. He would never be free, not while reflections still existed. A sudden vibration buzzed in his pocket. He nearly screamed. His phone. His trembling fingers pulled it out. The screen lit up, displaying a single unread message from the same unknown number that had followed him through the nightmare. "He is not dead." Ethan swallowed hard. Another message arrived instantly. "You only broke the room, not him." A third, "And he wants what he was promised." Ethan's breaths came in sharp bursts. "My place," he whispered. "He wants my place." His phone buzzed again. "Run!" The warehouse lights flickered. Ethan didn't wait. He ran toward the exit, boots thudding across cracked concrete. The sunlight outside felt like salvation, a warm slice of reality he desperately needed to reach. He shoved open the metal door, stumbling into daylight. For a few precious seconds, he breathed. He was outside. He was safe. Then he saw it. Across the street, in the window of an abandoned office building, his reflection, standing still, watching, smiling faintly. He stepped back. The reflection stepped forward, not toward him inside the glass, closer to the inner surface, closer to breaking through. Ethan turned and ran. He sprinted down the street, ignoring the startled looks of pedestrians. Glass windows flashed distorted reflections. Car mirrors flickered. Even puddles on the sidewalk rippled with silhouettes that weren't his. Every reflection he passed reacted. Everyone. He ducked into an alley, chest burning, muscles shaking. He collapsed against a brick wall, trying to steady his breath. "Think, Ethan," he whispered. "Think. He can't reach you if there's no reflection. He needs a surface, a mirror, glass, metal, anything that shines." He looked around, trash bags, discarded cardboard, rough brick, no reflections. He allowed himself one shuddering breath of relief. Then a voice echoed softly behind him. "You forgot one." Ethan froze. He turned slowly. A small shard of glass, a broken bottle fragment lay on the ground. His reflection stared out of it, and it wasn't delayed. It was ahead. It smiled wider. A soft cracking sound echoed from the shard. Ethan's panic exploded. He stomped the glass, grinding it into dust, heart hammering in terror. When the shard was completely crushed, he backed away, breath shaking violently. But then a dozen more reflections flickered to life around him. Windows above the alley, a chrome door handle, a rain puddle forming from a leaking pipe, even the metal surface of a rusted dumpster. Every reflection showed him. Every reflection began to smile. No, please stop. Behind him, his phone vibrated violently. He didn't want to look, but he did. One new message. "It doesn't matter how many you break." Another message appeared instantly. "He learned you." Ethan's blood turned to ice. Learned him. Learned how to mimic him without needing a mirror. Learned enough to finish the copy. He dropped the phone, stumbling backward, legs shaking uncontrollably. Reflections around him began to change. His eyes darkened in them. His skin paled. His mouth stretched a little too wide. His posture straightened into unnatural stillness. He watched in horror as the reflections transformed into the double, into the thing that had hunted him. Then all the reflections, dozens, hundreds, spoke at once, not aloud, in his mind. "We're almost ready." Ethan turned and ran again, bursting out of the alley and sprinting through the streets with reckless desperation. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know where safety existed. He only knew he had minutes before the copy completed itself without needing the mirrored world. Minutes before he stepped through. Minutes before Ethan became the reflection. He turned a corner and froze. A massive glass skyscraper towered above him, every floor reflecting the sky like a colossal mirror. Hundreds of Ethans stared back at him. Not one was human. They all smiled. His phone buzzed on the ground behind him. A final message appeared. "It's time." Ethan stood frozen, staring up at the towering glass skyscraper. Every floor reflected a corrupted version of himself. Hundreds of warped Ethans smiling back at him with widening, unnatural grins. Their eyes were hollow, their postures rigid, their mouths stretching just a little too far. The sunlight gleamed across the mirrored windows, making the reflections shimmer like living things, and they were alive. They moved, not in sync with him, in sync with something else. A ripple passed through all of them at once, a wave of motion as every reflection tilted its head to the left, then to the right, perfectly mirrored across the entire building. Ethan's stomach dropped. His heart hammered violently in his chest. He stumbled backward, tripping over the curb as he tried to tear his eyes away. A soft vibration hummed through the ground, not from the street, from the windows. The reflections leaned forward, every single one, their smiles widened. Ethan bolted. He sprinted across the street, nearly being struck by a passing car. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could feel them watching him, thousands of eyes tracking him from hundreds of reflective surfaces. The world wasn't safe anymore. Nowhere was. He ran until his lungs burned, weaving between alleyways, side streets, anywhere with as little reflective material as possible. But even brick walls were betrayed by fragments of glass, metal vents, small puddles, the shine of someone's phone screen, and each one flickered with a distorted piece of him. He ducked beneath an overpass, gasping, gripping one of the concrete pillars for support. Sweat dripped from his forehead, his vision blurred, his chest tightened around each breath. Then a reflection appeared in a puddle near his foot. It wasn't following his movements. It wasn't delayed. It wasn't early. It was staring directly at him, waiting. Ethan staggered back. "Stop," he said, voice trembling. "Stop. Stop." The reflection smiled. A soft crack echoed through the puddle's surface. A hand pressed outward from inside the reflection, warping the water upward without breaking tension. Ethan screamed and kicked the puddle, scattering it across the dirt. Droplets splashed against the pillar, but each tiny bead captured a minuscule version of the smiling reflection. They blinked. They all blinked. Ethan stumbled away, horrified. His phone buzzed again. He snatched it up, hands shaking violently. One message: "You can't outrun what you made." Another: "He's with you now." Ethan's throat tightened. His grip on the phone faltered. "He's with me," he whispered. The ground vibrated beneath his feet. Shadows distorted, slowly, agonizingly. The space beneath the overpass darkened as though drenched in ink. The darkness pulsed, spread, thickened, and then he stepped out, not from a mirror, not through a reflection, from the shadow itself. The man behind the mirror unfolded into reality with long, impossibly thin limbs dripping with reflective liquid that evaporated as it touched the ground. His towering frame bent unnaturally beneath the overpass, forcing him to hunch, yet he still nearly brushed the concrete ceiling. He had no eyes. He had no face, only that mouth wide, grinning, stretching across smooth skin like a wound carved into existence. Ethan froze. His heart stopped. The entity tilted its head, studying him the way a predator sizes up prey not worth hurrying for. Each motion rippled the shadows around him, bending the light in unnatural patterns. The reflections around the overpass began to distort. Car windows, metal railings, glass shards on the ground, even the faint shine on Ethan's own eyes. They all displayed the double, his double. It stepped forward inside each reflection simultaneously. Ethan stumbled backward, hands raised defensively. "Why?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why me? Why can't you just leave me alone?" A voice answered him, not from the entity, from every reflection surrounding him. A chorus of distorted versions of his own voice spoke at once. "You saw him first." Ethan shook his head violently. "I didn't know. I didn't mean to. I don't want this." Another layered whisper echoed through the reflections. "He does." The man behind the mirror extended one long arm toward Ethan. Ethan screamed and ran. He sprinted out from under the overpass, nearly collapsing from adrenaline. Cars honked as he stumbled into traffic. But he didn't stop. He darted between vehicles, ignoring the shouts of drivers. He ran until his legs burned, until his chest felt like it was going to split open. He turned into another alley and froze. The alley walls were lined with metal panels, dozens of them. Each panel held his reflection, but not one reflection matched the others. Some were smiling, some were crying, some were expressionless, some were twisted, corrupted, incomplete. One reflection looked calm, too calm. It stepped forward in the metal surface. Ethan backed away instantly. "Stay back!" But the reflection didn't obey. It pressed its hands against the metal from the inside, warping the surface outward. The metal bulged. The panel cracked. A hand pushed through. Ethan screamed and sprinted away, turning blindly into side roads, alleys, anywhere else. But everywhere he looked, reflections twisted, darkened, smiled, doors warped, windows trembled. Even the black surface of a parked car rippled with something trying to push through. His phone buzzed again. A new message. "You can't break them all." Another. He's already finishing the copy. Ethan collapsed against a chain-link fence. Chest heaving, he looked down at a faint reflection in a puddle at his feet. It wasn't his face. It wasn't the double. It was a face with no features except a mouth. A wide, stretching, grinning mouth. The man behind the mirror's voice seeped into his thoughts like oil through fabric. Soon, Ethan staggered away, barely able to stand. His vision blurred around the edges. His limbs felt heavy. The world around him tilted and warped as reflections multiplied, gaining more depth, more solidity. He was losing. They were becoming. He turned a corner and stumbled into a dead end. A brick wall loomed ahead. Behind him, the reflections slowly encircled, appearing in every reflective surface. His phone vibrated one last time. He looked down, terrified. The final message read, "He's right behind you." Ethan did not dare turn around. His body locked in place, muscles trembling, lungs refusing to draw air. The dead-end alley seemed to shrink around him, its high brick walls closing in, every reflective surface shards of metal. Small puddles, cracked windows above glimmered with distorted versions of himself. Dozens of Ethan faces stared back with hollow eyes and stretched grins. But none of them mattered compared to the presence behind him. The heaviness in the air deepened, pressing against his spine, his skull, his breath. The shadows on the ground bent toward him, bending unnaturally like they were crawling forward. He closed his eyes. Don't turn, don't look, don't give him the moment he's waiting for. But then, a voice thick as tar seeped directly into his mind. Turn around. Ethan's breath hitched. His fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. Tears burned at the corners of his eyes. He did not turn. He bolted with a strangled cry. He launched himself forward, slamming into the brick wall and climbing it. His fingers clawed desperately at rough mortar and old rusted metal rungs. He scrambled upward, not fast enough, not nearly fast enough, but moving anything to get away. A cold wind swept upward behind him. Not real wind, a pull, a suction, a summoning. His legs slipped. His grip failed for a moment, and his foot scraped against the wall. Something vast and cold brushed his ankle like a fingertip made of shadow. He screamed and climbed faster, throwing himself onto the rooftop edge and rolling onto solid concrete. His lungs heaved with painful gasps. His chest burned, but he didn't stop. He crawled backward until his spine hit a ventilation unit, eyes wide, staring at the rooftop access hatch. Silence. Then a crack. A long claw-like hand rose over the edge of the rooftop, gripping the concrete with impossible strength. Fingers stretched far too long, flexing with sickening elegance. One joint cracked backward, then another, then another. The man behind the mirror pulled himself upward, emerging into the fading daylight. He was taller now, much taller. His form shimmered between shadow and reflective liquid, as if he were still made of the collapsing mirror dimension and struggling to hold shape. His featureless head tilted upward, drinking in the sky like he had never seen it before. And his mouth, the grin widened across the blank surface, stretching from one side of his head to the other like a gash through reality. Ethan crawled away, shaking violently. No, no. Please, please. The reflections around the rooftop tingled, flickering to life. The windows of distant buildings distorted. Metallic railings twisted their reflections into grinning figures. Even the lenses of passing cars on the street below flashed with corrupted versions of Ethan. There was nowhere to run, nowhere without reflections. And now, he didn't even need them. The man behind the mirror began to stand to his full height. The world around him bent as if resisting his presence. Storm clouds swirled across the sky, spiraling into a vortex directly above the building. Wind whipped against Ethan's body, tearing at his clothes, roaring in his ears. The rooftop access door burst open. Ethan flinched and saw someone. A man, a security guard, late 30s, wide eyes. Hey, are you all right? Ethan's voice broke. Run! But the guard didn't understand. He turned. He saw him. The guard's face drained of color. His flashlight hit the ground. His legs buckled beneath him, and he dropped backward down the metal stairs, screaming until his voice cut off abruptly. The man behind the mirror didn't even glance at him. He only watched Ethan. Reflections rippled across his surface, fragments of Ethan's memories, movements, expressions flashing across the entity like he was stitching together a flawless design. Finishing the copy, Ethan forced himself to stand. His legs wobbled beneath him. He backed toward the opposite edge of the rooftop, gripping the railing until metal cut into his hands. His phone buzzed, slowly, with dread twisting his insides. Ethan lifted it. One message. Jump! His hands trembled. No, I can't. I'll die. Another message appeared. If you don't, you'll live where he came from. Ethan's blood ran cold. He pictured it, the mirror hall, the infinite reflections, the endless screaming chamber of fractured light. Death was mercy compared to that place. The man behind the mirror stepped closer. The rooftop vibrated. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface. Reflections of his face appeared inside each crack, laughing without sound. Ethan climbed onto the ledge. Wind howled around him. traffic hummed far below. His heart felt unbearably small inside his chest. He closed his eyes. A reflection in the glass railing blinked. Then it whispered, "Wait." Ethan froze. He opened his eyes. The reflection wasn't corrupted. It wasn't the double. It was him, his true reflection, the same one that had spoken in the mirror hall. Its mouth moved silently. "Don't give him what he wants." Ethan shook his head. I don't know what to do." The reflection pointed behind him, at the entity, at the cracks spreading across the rooftop, at the world tearing open. A silent message. "He wants you to surrender. Don't." The man behind the mirror extended a hand. The world dimmed. Shadows reached for Ethan's ankles. The reflection in the railing glowed faintly. "Fight him." Ethan stared back at his reflection, breath trembling. "How?" The reflection raised its hand. Ethan copied it. A pulse of light rippled through the railing, through the rooftop, through Ethan. The man behind the mirror recoiled slightly, but unmistakably. Ethan gasped. He could hurt him. He didn't know how. He didn't know why. But he could. The reflection's mouth formed one last word before the railing shattered inward. "Run!" Ethan turned and sprinted toward the rooftop door, heart exploding in his chest. Behind him, the man behind the mirror roared. A soundless roar that split the sky. A roar that made every reflection in the city scream in unison. A roar that began the hunt again. And Ethan ran. Ethan ran. He didn't know where his legs were taking him, only that the rooftop door slammed behind him with a metallic echo that vibrated through his bones. The stairwell spiraled downward, dimly lit by flickering bulbs. Every reflective surface, the metal railings, the glass covering the emergency lights, even the shine on the concrete seemed to shimmer with distorted motion. He didn't dare look. He just ran, his footsteps hammered against the stairs, the sound bouncing off the concrete walls like a rapid heartbeat. The building groaned as if something massive moved across its structure, stretching it, bending it, warping it. The air grew heavy with electric tension. He stumbled into a hallway. Office lights flickered overhead. Every single framed glass panel on the walls trembled with static. Reflections inside them twitched. He ran harder. His breath tore from his lungs in ragged chokes. The hallway stretched endlessly, as if the building itself was shifting into a mirrored labyrinth. Shadows warped, windows elongated. Every reflective surface flickered with distorted versions of him. Some reached out, some screamed silently, some smiled, some followed. One reflection lagged behind by a fraction of a second. Another moved a fraction ahead. A third stared directly at him and mouthed, "He's here." Ethan crashed into a door at the end of the hall, slamming it open and stumbling into a darkened office room. Desks, chairs, and monitors lay scattered. The monitors flickered with scrambled images, static, corrupted reflections, shifting shapes trying to take form. The lights flickered. The monitors went black. Then they all turned on at once, and every screen showed him, the man behind the mirror. His face, or lack of it, filled each monitor edge to edge. His wide mouth stretched in a smile that didn't belong to any living thing. The screens vibrated, the plastic frames creaking as if something inside was pushing outward. Ethan backed away. The screens bulged. One cracked, another warped outward like something pressing a hand against the inside of the display. Ethan turned and fled. He threw himself into another corridor, then another stairwell. Racing downward, the building seemed to coil around him, directing him, herding him toward what? A voice in his mind answered, "Me." He nearly fell down the stairs from the force of it. "Stop running." He didn't. He burst through a maintenance door into the underground parking garage. It was dark, cold, empty. Water dripped from overhead pipes in rhythmic plinks that echoed through the massive chamber. For a moment, just a moment, Ethan felt alone, safe. Then he saw it. Every car window in the garage, hundreds of them, lit up with reflections. Not his, not the double, the entity. Dozens of featureless faces stretched across the windshields, each wearing that impossible smile. Their mouths moved in perfect unison, forming words Ethan didn't hear but felt pressed into his skull like cold fingers. "Come back." Ethan staggered backward, his voice cracking in a sob. "No, leave me alone." He turned and ran deeper into the garage, but the cars shook. Their doors dented outward, mirrored surfaces rippled. The reflections inside began pushing, stretching outward, like something trapped under thin ice. Hands pressed against glass, faces bulged, mouths widened. Reality bends around the pressure of something trying to break through. Ethan sprinted toward the exit ramp, but as he reached the incline, a pair of long, claw-like fingers curled over the top edge. Then another, then another. The man behind the mirror pulled himself downward into the garage, his towering frame contorting unnaturally to fit into the low-ceilinged space. Shadows bent around him. The ground vibrated. He stepped forward. Every car window shattered inward. The reflections inside spilled out like liquid silver before reforming into dozens of partial doubles, twisted, incomplete versions of Ethan, crawling across the concrete with elongated limbs and wide, trembling smiles. Ethan screamed and ran toward a maintenance corridor. He shoved open a heavy metal door and slammed it behind him. The narrow hallway beyond was filled with pipes and electrical conduits. No reflective surfaces except the faint shine on the metal fixtures. He backed away from the door, breath sharp, mind racing, silence. Then, scratch. Something dragged across the door. Scratch. Fingers, searching. Then a voice seeped through the metal. Not loud, not aggressive. Calm, patient. "I only need one more piece." Ethan shook his head violently. "No, stop! You can't finish the copy. I won't let you." The voice smiled. "Yes, you will." The lights flickered overhead. The shine on the metal pipes brightened, and Ethan's reflection appeared in them. But it wasn't him. Its skin darkened, its eyes hollowed, its mouth stretched like a blade carving upward. It leaned forward inside the pipe as though peering out of a window. Then another reflection appeared, and another, and another. The corridor filled with dozens. Ethan spun, running toward the far exit. But halfway through the corridor, he froze. His reflection stood in front of him, not inside anything, not behind a surface, standing in the corridor, made of reflection, shaped like liquid glass, flickering like a living distortion. The reflection lifted its head, its voice. Ethan's voice echoed softly. "You already know how this ends." Ethan stumbled backward. "No." Another figure stepped beside the first, then another, and another. All reflections, all half-formed, all smiling, the corridor filled with them. Ethan turned, but the reflections behind him began crawling, some on the floor, some on the walls, some bending unnaturally from the pipes themselves. He had nowhere to run, nowhere to look, nowhere without reflections. His phone buzzed. He lifted it slowly. One message. "He's inside the last place you haven't checked." Ethan's breath caught. His hands trembled. "No, please." A new message appeared. "Look." Ethan didn't want to, but he did. He lifted the phone just enough to see his reflection in the black screen. It smiled and whispered, "I'm ready." Ethan's legs nearly gave out. The smiling reflection inside the black phone screen stared back at him alive, aware, and speaking with his voice. The cold corridor around him pulsed as if breathing. Every metallic surface vibrated softly, humming in a rhythm that wasn't mechanical but biological. Reflections shifted within them like restless predators. The reflection in the phone whispered, "I'm ready." Ethan dropped the device instinctively. It clattered against the concrete floor, the screen flickering like a heartbeat before going still, but the reflection didn't disappear. Its warped smile lingered on the dark glass, watching him without blinking. He staggered backward, hitting the wall of pipes behind him. The metal rattled. Every pipe shimmered with thin, distorted silhouettes, multiple Ethans flickering in and out of cohesion. Their hollow eyes rolled upward, their jaws unhinged with mechanical precision. Then they spoke, not aloud, inside his head. "All we need is you." The corridor lights flickered violently. Ethan pushed himself off the wall and ran. He sprinted down the maintenance hallway, boots pounding the metal grates, breath ripping through his chest. The air tightened as if the building itself were closing in around him. The corridor twisted visually, bending like a tunnel of warped glass. His head spun, his vision doubled. Reflections crawled alongside him, some inside pipes, some beneath the grates, some racing just ahead of him inside faint, impossible flickers of mirrored air. He burst through a rusted door and staggered into a massive industrial boiler room. Huge cylindrical tanks loomed like steel giants. Steam hissed from overhead vents. The air was thick, metallic, suffocating, but there were fewer reflective surfaces. He gasped with shaky relief. Then something tapped behind him. Tap, 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 like fingers on glass. Ethan spun. One of the steel tanks had polished enough areas to reveal shifting patterns, his reflection sliding across its curved surface like oil. But its mouth stretched wider now, way too wide. The reflection tapped again from inside the steel wall. Ethan backed toward the far corner of the boiler room. The tank groaned. The metal bulged outward. A hand pressed through not flesh, not glass, but liquid reflection forced into a humanoid shape. It pushed farther. Arm, shoulder, a half-formed head dripping with mirrored residue. Ethan ducked behind machinery, sprinting through the narrow space toward an emergency ladder on the far wall. He grabbed the rungs and climbed. Below him, the reflection creature pulled itself fully out of the steel and dropped onto the concrete with a sickening, metallic splash. It rose. Its body flickered between solidity and fluidity, like a hologram constructed from wet metal. Then it looked up at him. Its smile stretched upward. Ethan climbed faster. He reached the catwalk level and sprinted across the grated platform. His footsteps rattled through the room. Below, several more reflective surfaces began to shift water puddles. Polished bolts, dripping pipes, eyes opened inside them, smiles widened. They were all coming. He reached the far door and yanked it open. The hallway beyond was pitch black. The lights were out. No hum of electricity. Dead silence. Ethan hesitated, but the screech of metal warping behind him forced him forward into the darkness. As he stepped into the hallway, motion sensor lights flickered on, barely illuminating the space. The walls on both sides were lined with glass inspection windows. Every window showed a different version of him, some terrified, some smiling, some banging on the inside of the glass, some whispering words he could not hear. He walked forward slowly, heart pounding. The reflections followed. Each window's Ethan tracked him with unnatural smoothness. Some pressed their palms against the glass. Some leaned close. One pressed its face flat and grinned with teeth too sharp. Ethan swallowed hard. Then the corridor stretched. Literally, the floor elongated under him like a rubber band pulled tight. The door at the end drifted farther away. He ran toward it, but the walls warped inward, curving like a tunnel of glass. Reflections crawled out of their frames, like spiders made of light. Their hands reached for him. Ethan screamed and dove forward. He burst through the far door, falling into a brightly lit storage facility lined with metal shelves. Boxes, crates, and industrial supplies filled the aisles. For once, there were no glass windows, no mirrors. He exhaled with shaking relief. Then he heard footsteps, soft, bare, familiar. He turned slowly. A figure stood at the end of the aisle. Him, but not a reflection, solid, physical, breathing, the double, fully formed. Its skin no longer flickered. Its posture no longer twitched. Its smile was small, confident, natural. Too natural. And its eyes, they were no longer hollow. They were his. Ethan stepped back, trembling. You're not him. You're not the entity. The double tilted its head gently. Its voice. Ethan's exact voice answered, "I never was." Ethan froze. What? What do you want? The double took one calm step closer. To finish what you started. I didn't start anything. You looked at him, the double whispered. You saw him. You gave him a shape he liked. I didn't know. And now, the double continued softly. I know enough to replace you. Ethan shook his head violently. I'll fight you. I won't let you take my place. I won't let you. The double smiled. You can't fight a perfect copy. The lighting in the storage room flickered. Every reflective piece of metal box edges, conveyor belts, machine casings shimmered. The double's reflection appeared in all of them, not Ethan's. The double's. Ethan backed away until his spine hit a metal pillar. The double approached with slow, deliberate steps, eyes unblinking. You've run long enough. It whispered, now give me the last piece. What piece? Ethan shouted desperately. The double raised a finger and pointed to Ethan's chest. Your fear. Ethan's body froze. The reflections behind the double began to crawl forward, half-formed mimic creatures dripping with liquid glass. Their eyes were wrong, their mouths too wide. They crawled silently. The double reached forward. Let me in. Ethan shut his eyes instinctively, and something else happened. The room brightened. Heat radiated from Ethan's skin. A soft glow pulsed from his reflection in a metal toolbox to his left. His true reflection, the one that had warned him. It stepped forward inside the metal surface, pressing its palm outward. A pulse of white light exploded. The double recoiled violently, its smile ripping unnaturally wide as its skin distorted. The mimic creatures screamed soundlessly and dissolved into silver vapor. Ethan gasped, collapsing to his knees. The double's face twisted with fury. You can't stop this. It snarled. He is almost here. Ethan looked up. Then I'll finish you before he arrives. The double's smile faded. For the first time it looked afraid, but only for a moment. Then it whispered, he's already in the last place you haven't checked. Ethan's blood turned cold. He knew exactly what that meant. His reflection, the true one, stared at him from the toolbox. Its lips moved. Run! Ethan ran because running was all he had left. The toolbox reflection's final warning. Run still echoed inside his skull as his feet pounded across the metal flooring of the storage room. His heart thrashed against his ribs, fighting to burst free. The world around him warped in flashes, shelves bending, shadows twisting, metallic surfaces shimmering with half-formed silhouettes. Behind him, the double rose slowly to its feet. It didn't chase. It didn't need to. You can't outrun what's already inside you. It whispered. Ethan staggered through the far exit door and plunged into a long industrial hallway. Pipes rattled overhead. Red emergency lights flickered along the ceiling, casting the corridor into a hellish strobe. Every flash revealed new reflections, some stretched thin, some hollow-eyed, some smiling impossibly wide, all watching, all waiting. He ran, skidding around a corner, shoving through another maintenance door. The interior of the building shifted, as if reacting to him, walls elongating, floors tilting, reflective surfaces trembling with anticipation. He burst into a freight elevator lobby. A massive steel elevator stood at the center, its doors cracked open just wide enough to reveal the dim interior. Ethan lunged toward it, squeezing through the gap and slamming his hand against the control panel. He jabbed the down button repeatedly. The doors groaned shut. Just before they closed completely, the lights in the hall flickered, revealing dozens of distorted doubles standing in the corridor, staring at him with silent hunger. The doors sealed shut. The elevator jolted downward. Ethan collapsed against the wall, sliding to the floor. His breath shook violently. Sweat dripped from his chin. He wasn't safe, not even close. The steel walls of the elevator shimmered faintly. Reflections began to ripple across them. First his own image, then an echo of his movements, then a mismatch, then a delay, then his reflection smiled. Ethan's stomach twisted. Not again, not here. The lights in the elevator snapped off. Pitch black swallowed him. A whisper breathed beside his ear. You forgot the last place. Ethan screamed and slammed his hand against against the emergency light. A dim red bulb flickered on. The reflection on the steel wall had changed. It had no eyes, only a mouth, a wide, grinning mouth stretching across the smooth head. Ethan staggered to his feet and hammered the control panel. The elevator screeched, stuttered, then resumed descending, but the reflection didn't stop. It pushed outward. The steel warped, bending like paper pressed from inside. Metallic groans filled the cabin. The reflection's mouth opened wider, wide enough to split its entire face. Something pushed against the metal, a hand, a head, a form trying to force itself into the elevator. Ethan braced himself in the far corner. No, stay back! A violent shudder ran through the elevator. It jerked downward, then stopped completely with a grinding scream. Lights died. Silence. Then the ceiling above him dented outward. Tap, 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 like knuckles on glass. Ethan swallowed a sob. "It's me," a voice whispered, the double's voice, identical to his own. "I'm almost here." The ceiling split, a hand long, reflective, dripping with liquid silver reached through. Ethan dove toward the elevator doors and pried his fingers between them. He screamed with effort, muscles tearing, skin splitting, but the doors budged, just enough for him to wedge himself through the gap and fall into the darkened service shaft. He plummeted. Metal beams rushed past him in a blur before his hand caught onto a maintenance ladder. Pain tore through his arm as his body jerked violently, but he held on. Below him, darkness. Above him, scratching, shrieking, pounding. He climbed higher, higher. He reached a maintenance platform and rolled onto it. Gasping, his vision blurred. He blinked until the world steadied. Then he froze. The wall beside him, rough concrete, slowly began to shine. A reflection formed. Not his, the double. Its face perfectly formed. Calm, confident, emerged in the new reflective sheen. "You should stop running now," it whispered. Ethan backed farther onto the platform until his heel struck something metallic. He turned. A large inspection mirror lay shattered across the floor. Only one piece remained whole. His true reflection stared back at him from that shard, not smiling, not distorted, just watching him with urgent, desperate eyes. Its lips moved silently. "Break me," Ethan stared, breath catching. "No. If I break you, I break myself." The reflection nodded and mouthed a single word. "Exactly." Ethan's heart stopped. The double stepped out of the wall, its liquid glass body dripping onto the metal. "You're out of time," it said softly. Ethan picked up the shard. It pulsed faintly warm. "Alive." The double took a step closer. "I only need the last piece." Ethan tightened his grip. "What piece?" The double smiled gently. "Your place." The maintenance shaft shuddered violently. Shadows crawled up the walls. Metallic surfaces warpy. And then he arrived. The man behind the mirror unfolded from the darkness like a creature blooming from shadow. His towering limbs bent reality around them. His wide mouth curved upward in predatory hunger. Every reflection in the shaft echoed him. This was the final moment. Ethan looked at the shard, then at the entity, then at the double. His true reflection raised a shaking hand and whispered, "End it." Ethan lifted the shard over his head. The double lunged. The man behind the mirror reached forward. Ethan screamed and shattered the shard against the floor. Light erupted. A blinding, shattering blast rippled through the shaft, tearing reflections apart, burning shadows to ash. The double shrieked as its skin peeled into vapor. The entity roared silently, its form fracturing into ribbons of collapsing dimensions. The entire building shook. Metal screamed. Concrete split. Ethan felt himself falling through light, through shadow, through the collapse of everything reflective. Then, silence. When he opened his eyes, he was lying in a field. Grass, wind, sunlight, no reflections anywhere. He sat up slowly, trembling as he looked around. Was it over? He staggered to his feet and froze. A small pond shimmered beneath a nearby tree. His reflection appeared in it. It blinked, then smiled, and whispered, "You didn't break me. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories."